So welcome everybody to the meeting of the Parks, Trails and Greenways Advisory Committee. And welcome Terry.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome to the, yeah. And we've got a new member, Trails, as I recall. Do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Terry. I've lived on the island since about 1999. I have 3 kids, and they're 17, 14, 11. I guess I call myself an environmentalist activist, more of a recreationalist as well. I don't know, recently I've had a really renewed interest. I don't know, I went from just walking the lake when I wanted to go to just going crazy exploring Bowen recently. So,
Trails.
Trails. I'm just like on a mission to find every single trail I can find.
Look at Jeremy.
So
well, you've come to the right shop.
Yeah.
So
And it's be interesting to find out what you guys do here. So thank you for inviting me and letting me come in and join.
Yeah.
So
No, well, welcome aboard.
thank you.
And this will be a, it's Parks, Trails and Greenways Committee is an active bunch, so we've got a couple of walkabouts to schedule, and we tried this last year too. Of course, it made it snow.
Yeah. It's the only way Christmas schedule
A
a
bunch of times, so yes, we can use caution, but this will be quite a big meeting, so I better get going. But welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And
Do you want to get quickly do their names?
yeah, that's what I thought. We could just go around quickly. I'm not exactly following the agenda, but do you want to start, DG?
Yep, so I'm DG, Dorothy Grace, just in case you were wondering.
That's what it is.
Dorothy Grace. Dorothy Grace. And as I said, I've got a background in environmental consulting, biology, environmental education, and I do project management for ecological stewardship right now.
Yeah.
And I've been on this committee since whenever it was. When did we start?
Trying to work out what it was.
We're trying to figure
6
that out.
years?
Originally back in the mid-90s with the OCP, forging the OCP.
Yeah.
So it's been a while.
Yes.
Mark, I used to work in the Parks Department for the municipality and have been interested in trails and environmental issues.
Yeah.
I've been on the committee for less than a year now. 8 months, 10 months, maybe? Maybe even less.
But he used to come and listen, so that
Yeah.
counts for something.
I did, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was out there. Yeah.
And
That's true.
I'm Sue Ellen, and I've been involved with municipal things, trails, parks, conservancy, and ecological stuff since I moved to the island, which was back in like '90 or '91. Anyway,
Cool.
But not too much for the first few years because I was busy having a son too. But anyway, go ahead, Bonnie.
And I'm Bonnie, and I know you, Terry, sort of from about, and I have an 11-year-old daughter as well. So, I'm the manager of Parks and Environment here, and I'm not a voting member, so it's not that I'm not paying attention, I just don't put my hand up for any of the votes that you have as a committee. I'm here to answer questions and to present things where applicable. And we've been working on a parks plan since 2015, so really long coming. I think we're getting closer and closer, and hopefully early in the new year we'll have it adopted by council, like probably February. That's my goal. So, and then we can start implementation, probably with a trail master plan of some sort, maybe picking out some projects. So that's really, it's great timing that you came on board. And there's more members of the committee, they're just not here tonight. So there's more people to meet. There's how many? There's 11. 10.
I'm Christine Miller, and this thing has been on the island since 1980, so way back. I'm involved with Bihora, which was the horse organisation on the island, and that's really my main interest. Trails from the point of view of riding for horses, to always keep that first and foremost, in my mind anyway, and make sure it doesn't get overlooked. Apart from that, I don't really have any expertise.
Knows all the trails on
The long history of what we've done before and hasn't worked. So, yeah.
Oh, I brought some of that today.
Jeremy Howe, I've been here since '82, and just have a long history of interest in trails and bushwhacking and so on, and I've been on the Trails Committee back in the 90s. Oh, well, actually with Christine, when it was first formed as an advisory group to the OCP.
Before there was a municipality. When we
Exactly,
were
yeah.
Islands Trust
And
trustees.
was happy to discover that trails have consistently been the most significant thing in Islanders' minds in terms of recreation, all through that time to the present. So,
Very good. Okay, and there's more members. We'll get them to introduce themselves later. We've also got Daniel at the back, and he can introduce himself when he comes. But he's one of our planners on Bowen, and he'll introduce a couple of big topics for you to sink your teeth into. And here comes Claudia.
Great.
And this is, and this is Claudia. You guys know each other?
We do.
Very good. So we won't do the introduction then. I'll just keep going. So if we can look at the minutes, I'm glad to have you here. At the agenda. Yeah, sorry. Anybody got anything to add to the agenda?
We have 2 on-table items, which are the we walk about map. So, beautiful.
The two beautiful.
Made by Carla.
They are nice, yeah.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Very good.
I'd like to just raise a comment about the parks plan
Mhm.
under new business.
Okay. Or maybe continuing business. Where can we get that? I
So
think,
5.2. This is summarizing.
okay. Unless it comes up earlier. 5.2, park plan. Okay. Anybody else? All right, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you, Christine and Mark. Anybody in favor?
All in favor?
All in favor? Thank you. Yes. They're getting ahead of me. I was going, what? Want to add something? Okay. All right. So let's look at the minutes. I found my notes. Couldn't find them for a bit, so it took me a while. There may be some things that were missed there.
So it looks like Mark's got some
Yeah,
stuff
what have
to
you got
say.
there, Mark?
On page 3 of 6, the first one, the first paragraph, this is kind of a busy one. Parks plan and associated maps will be followed by implementation and creation. Really should be creation and implementation, just an order thing, I think.
Okay.
The last full paragraph on the page, the parks plan consultation process that this project would include scope termination. What is
Oh,
scope?
determination.
Okay. Cool. I was
No
wondering
more
if
scope.
it was a typo or it was like we're ending this. Wow. Okay. Page 4 of 6, the Kate's Lane easement. Is that supposed to be the Kate's Hill easement?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So,
And it links Village Drive and not Village Square to Stephen Place.
Village Drive to see.
All right. That's all.
Awesome.
good. Okay. Anybody else got anything? I think I got it. Yes, it was linking to Seaview, right? Does that need to be in there? Or-
Yeah, it links to Stephen Place.
Okay, that's okay. All right, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Or the minutes? Thank you, Mark. And Christine, all in favor? Okay. Nobody's opposed. That's great. Thank you very much. And now we're going to move to public comments, except nobody from the public is here, so we'll just skip right on to Daniel, so he can go home and be with his family. He's got 2 big referrals for us today.
Okay, so first today I'm going to talk to you about a rezoning. So I'm Daniel Martin, I'm the planner here, so I come here periodically, mostly when something is referred by council to the committee and that has to do with land use planning. So the first thing that I'm here to talk to you about is a rezoning application we've received for 391 Salal Road. So it starts on page 12 of your agenda is the council report, and then the presentation I gave to council then starts on page 18. But so for those who don't know, Salal Road is sort of opposite Josephine Lake. And Salal Road itself is on the other side of the road. So
It's over here, if you want to have a look. Josephine Lake, Solel Road is somewhere in there.
yeah.
So we're sort of talking about. Okay.
So the property itself, currently under the current zoning and OCP designation, is too small to subdivide. So it's about 2.5 acres, 2.5 hectares in size, and the minimum size is a 2 hectare minimum lot size, so they can't subdivide any smaller, and they would like to subdivide into 2 lots. So to do that, they would need to change their zoning and their OCP designation. So one of the things that we look at, and sort of council expects and community expects through rezoning is sort of some sort of community amenity. So that's how, as I'm sure you know, many of our trails and many of our parks come about as part of the rezoning process. And so one of the things that we flagged when we just did the review of the application is that in our OCP map, so Schedule E of the OCP is the one that outlines trails and parks. It has little bubble areas for where we want parks, and it has dotted lines where we want trails. So in the OCP map at that time, it shows this trail line running right through, and that's figure 4, so on page 15, right through the middle of that property that's on Solwell Road. So it said that was a desired trail connection. So one of the things we talked with the applicant about is the idea of, okay, as part of your application, we would expect, you know, like a trail dedication and probably land, not just the trail itself, but land on each side to have some sort of buffer. But when we came to council, basically what I wanted was to come to this committee to say, is this something that we still want? Because I know it's in the OCP schedule showing this trail route. I'm not sure if it's in the parks plan trail linkages, it's not. So it's sort of, is this something that we're still desiring to look for a trail connection here? And then second part is where the OCP map shows this trail go through, sort of in the middle of the lot. And is that still the desired location, or could it be, you know, at the far southern end of the lot instead of, if we're sort of looking at, if it's a 2.5 hectare property, they're looking to rezone to have a 1 hectare minimum lot size. And sort of look at it and go, okay, well maybe, you know, it'd be a trail, but also with like a significant park buffer around it, so it wouldn't just be like a trail with a fence on each side, but actually be a larger piece of land that could be maybe in the middle of the property or in the southern end. So that's really all I think that I had, other than, right, and so we currently have an existing statutory right-of-way that was registered on the property to the south of this one.
Was you on page 16?
So this is on page 16, yes, thank you. And so that was put in, I don't believe a trail was ever built to connect at that point Saw to the Crown and then to come down back again to Forest Ridge on the other side. But I know looking at I don't think I included it here, on our GIS map, where these two trail bricks come out is flagged as a wetland area in our riparian map. I'm not sure how much on the ground, but so I sort of look at that, maybe that's an opportunity we'd actually get a wider swath, and then we have some flexibility of where if a trail is done to connect that, where it actually comes out isn't necessarily right at that point.
Yeah, okay. I had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One, so these other, on page 16, these existing SROWs, that means something right away? Statutory right away? So those are places where a trail could have been built, and which one is their actual property on this?
On this, they would be Strata Lot 2, so just to the north of it.
Oh, okay, the one that says SL2.
Yeah,
Strata
exactly.
plan, okay. So, this one.
Yeah.
So there's actually sort of potential trail right-of-ways already through there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I was wondering, since you're here,
Yep.
I was thinking, you know, we do have, I'll just show it on this big map. We do have, here's Crippen Park, the meadow, the festival field.
Not the meadow though, you mean Bowfest Field?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's right. And Bowfest Festival Field. And then this first park is Davies Park, or whatever you want to call it, it's on the hill, right? And where the mailboxes are down here. And then,
That's Case Hill Park.
We call it
Natural
Hill
park.
Nature Park.
okay. And then somewhere here is Singing Woods, is that?
That's
It's almost adjacent to
yeah,
Case Hill
yeah,
Nature
yeah.
Park.
No, I'm looking at a different map, so excuse me.
Yeah.
So coming through here, and then this is a piece of, where's that little piece of park?
a little triangle.
Davies
Yeah.
Park.
Yeah.
Davies Park, is that? Is it here? No, that's right down the road. Oh, here it is, here. So right
Yeah.
here, okay? So we have another potential greenway that comes up from this side of Slug Cove, up through and or around Singing Woods, because I think that's what your current management plan is now, right? But we did do there are other ways through that neighborhood. This little piece of park. And then we're into these Grafton Lakelands, which are under development, right? So if you remember, we walked around there last year, And we were looking at trails, there are trails that go through this high end. So I would offer that we're already halfway across the island with another greenway on this side, another trail linkage greenway. It would have to go through the subdivision, but we found our way through there. There will be trails through Grafton, and then ecological reserve. So we would have to come down and around, and this is the piece of crown. So all we have really between us is 1 or 2 lots, or come down to the road, or both. And then you could come down this way and, I don't know, possibly come through this piece of crown and be down on our way to the golf course, something, right? So this is part of the way we do, we have traditionally done trail planning on greenways, planning on Bowen, seeing what connections can we make, what's partly happening already. And you'll get very familiar with these maps and things. It'll take a while, but hang in there, Terry. And because I'm going to pass this one around. This is a, yeah, you can see the lot on there. This is Josephine Lake and some of the parks and riparian zones around it. So you can see from a wildlife perspective, it's actually more connected. Because I think that the lot must be this one up here? No.
I think it's this one.
Yeah, that one, that curvy
Yep.
one. Yeah.
And is this the wetland that we're talking about, that Danny was referring to?
It might be. I didn't have time to make a color copy. But just keep sending it around and we can talk, yeah?
What are the green areas?
Covenanted, I would guess.
Either
So that would be
covenanted
area?
or riparian
Yeah.
or,
Because
Park.
all the way around the lake is
Right.
covenanted
Yeah.
for no development, right?
yeah. So there's sort of the
So
people
that's-
walking
that
trails
would be
and then there's
statutory
the
right away, probably.
wildlife and the spores and the seeds and the birds. Claudia?
Daniel, I was wondering, you mentioned that it wouldn't just be the trail width, but maybe
Yeah.
a wider buffer zone. Are there any precedents, like what kind of area might council be willing to ask for in regards to allowing this to go through against the OCP as it currently is zoned?
Yeah, I think that there's precedences on Bowen. Sort of sometimes every case ends up being different in terms of, it might be looking on the site and be like, okay, what do you need to make a usable lot? But sort of when I look at the math and I say, okay, they're asking to go to a 1 hectare minimum lot size for the subdivide in half, and they're about 2.5 hectares. I say, okay, there's half a hectare, that's about an acre of land that, you know, in theory could be done to make a nice buffer and sort of
So it could be
protect
kind
the
of a widish band, and
Mhm.
which is better, as I understand from Bonnie, in that, well, and probably you guys, some of you too, the narrower you have, if you have a narrow forested band, half the trees blow down. Whereas if it's wider, it's more.
Yeah,
robust.
in terms of precedents with rezoning, like Grafton, it's like 50 or 60% of the land becomes park.
Yeah.
Some of the ones on Sunset that I often look to, so like the Headwaters rezoning, I think it's like half of it.
Yeah, they're all 50%.
Yeah, the Burgess was probably like 40% where the Ready Kitchen is now.
Yeah.
And Susan Proctor as well, I think was about 50.
Yeah.
So
Christine?
Yeah, I guess we're going on a walkabout, so we would see that
Mhm.
are there restrictions as, as regards to
Yeah.
are there obvious places where it would work and wouldn't work? Is that going to be a factor?
yeah, so I think that is, and that's what I'd love to,
Okay.
do a site visit with the Parks
And
Service,
also
with their
just to
expertise to see.
Test out the 2 existing right-of-ways, like,
Yeah.
are they enough?
Mhm.
Maybe it doesn't, maybe another one wouldn't be of value to the community. Jeremy?
I see 2 things here. In relation, I actually talked to John Lord recently about this, and apparently the easterly right-of-way is kind of never been formally
Yeah,
made.
yeah.
It's completely obscure. Nobody would ever know that it wasn't private land. So that needs to be defined. But there's an obvious link between the 2 roads in the sense of a neighborhood connection.
Yep.
And that's kind of logical. But the link to the surveyed crown lands, as I see them, those crown lands are kind of isolated in the sense that they're bounded either by private lands or the ecological reserve, which we're not supposed to go into. Of course, that wouldn't stop it. No, but I mean, you know what I mean, yeah. The, in the sense that possibly future passage along the border of the ecological reserve to make links, for example, to this Seymour Bay, Queen Charlotte Heights Trail. Those all make sense, and those crown lands, like why couldn't we sort of go there if there's interesting things? I don't have a lot of experience in those. Just many years ago, I remember crossing through them and led a nature hike through them. There's a lot of sort of mature Douglas firs I remember in there, but I think the most obvious thing is the link between the two roads as a neighborhood trail. That it goes through Crown Lands is meaningful for future whatevers.
Yeah.
But if there is a swamp there, then the constraints of topography obviously are going to be pretty. Those should be determining. I mean, you can, like, who wants to disturb a swamp if you can avoid it?
Well, let's set up a walkabout to take a look at that on the land. But thank you, and also for the big picture view, because you're right. We're looking into the future, not just next year, but 50 years, possibly longer.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Just a question, if in the agreement there's a trail, there's a dedication through the middle of the property, would they take back the statutory right away? Would we lose
So that's on
that?
the neighboring property itself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it borders their property in terms of like where you see it.
Right.
The northern end of it is their property line essentially.
Okay. How wide is it? Do you know?
I think is it 3 meters?
What does it say?
See, that's another option. Should make it
He's
wider.
thinking of 3 meters.
Depending on where.
What makes sense?
Yeah.
If it's wet there, I mean, that's where I would want to make sure that we put the trail in a place that makes sense for a trail, not makes sense for the subdivided property, you know, like from the lens I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
You know? So
And
that-
also, if we can protect the wetland, if there's a wetland or whatever. So we need to go on a walkabout, I think, as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody got any other questions for Daniel about it before we move on to the
And do
next
we
one?
have a date scheduled for that walkabout?
Not yet.
So I'll send a doodle poll because we also want to involve the Recreation Commission as well, because we're collaborative groups and collaborative municipality. So if I can get a general sense of availability, I can send a doodle poll out. Thinking Sundays is working for you guys.
Was there something already scheduled for January
Yes.
6th or something? And what's that one?
Lee Creek walkabout, that's
Lee
related to
Creek.
these.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good to know when we're scheduling this other.
9:30.
That's a Saturday, 9:30 in the morning. And so the other, you know, what we've often done in this committee, and I don't know how it would work with you, Terry, is we've often done Friday afternoons, depending on the time.
Weekends work better for me.
Do they now?
Yeah.
Okay. And
In the summer when it's light out later, that'd be fine.
yeah, that's right. We tend to, oh yeah, last year we had trouble with this anyway because of the daylight. Because we've got 3 walkabouts on our plate, so why don't we set out
Saturday,
June
Sunday,
polls,
okay.
Saturday, Sunday for the 13th, 14th, 20th, and 21st, and see where that gets us for the other two of them. That gives us 3 in January. You realize we're setting ourselves up for the snow again.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, okay. And then the second thing Daniel's brought for us is a little different, and I don't know if people had a chance to look at this, but this is our first ever draft subdivision and services bylaw. Somebody else out there?
Yeah, so this is our draft subdivision servicing bylaw. So the municipality has had a draft subdivision servicing bylaw since incorporation. We've never had an adopted subdivision servicing bylaw, so this is an exciting step for us. So on page 11, there's a background, just a little overview, 1 page, and then the bylaw itself starts on page page 27. But, so for those who don't know, just some background in terms of general land use planning and stuff, but so subdivisions in BC are done by somebody called the approving officer, and that's somebody who's appointed by council, but then it's an independent authority to make decisions on subdivisions. And so for us, that's Kathy, our CAO, is also our approving officer, and Judy McLeod is a planning consultant who's a deputy approving officer. So they have independent decision making on subdivisions, and they look at the layouts, and there's sort of legislative stuff that they look at to consider. One of which is, does it meet zoning, is sort of the most basic. Does your lot size work? But then it's sort of, they can consider the layouts and is it in the municipality's interest for this subdivision?
It's a little different in that council doesn't get involved in subdivisions usually, and usually advisory groups don't get involved either.
Yeah.
And over the years, this has led to some challenges, like places where the trail is too narrow to get around a corner with a horse, for example, or where there's the trail has a jog in it, and then there's the stairs, or funny little things where things don't line up. So now this document may help us be a bridge for some of those issues. Would that be correct?
It's a little complicated. So in terms of, I've laid out here, there's a number of sort of policies and bylaws that the municipality can have that guide an approving officer and guide subdivision. So I talked about, obviously, the land use bylaw lays out minimum lot sizes, average lot sizes. It lays out in our land use bylaw too, we have some regulations about lot sizes or shapes and stuff. The official community plan has policies in it. So one of them that's key that every municipality generally has is something about park land dedication. So if you're subdividing more than 5 lots that aren't, unless they're all 10-acre lots like your brother Curtis, you need to provide 5%, either 5% of the land or 5% of the value of the land as park. So either as a park land or park dedication. And if there's a policy in your OCP, it means you get to choose. And that's sometimes where the approving officer will refer it to council for advice on whether we want it. But then the way that the law is written out is it's the municipality's choice. So I don't know always, Bowen has been as strong in that, but in theory you could say, we want 5% of the land and we want the waterfront land, thank you very much. I don't mind that it's, more valuable. I don't want the cliff, I want the but so that's what's laid out in the official community plan, and then that's guided by other master plans, such as the parks master plan. So that's a key one in terms of where it says, this is where we need parks, this is where we need trails, and that's something that approving officer, when they review a subdivision, they can look at and say, okay, we need a trail here and we need a park here, because that's what the community's asked for. So that's what we're doing. So what the subdivision servicing bylaw is it's a technical document, and it lays out minimum standards for works and services undertaken by a developer at time of subdivision. So it's laid out in the Local Government Act what we can do with it. So it permits the municipality to regulate and prescribe minimum standards for the dimensions, locations, alignments, and gradients of roads through the subdivision of land. It requires that roads, sidewalks, boulevards, street lighting, wiring, and other services be located and constructed in accordance.
This is page 11.
This is page 11. The standards set out in the bylaw, and it can require that within a subdivision, a water distribution system, fire hydrant system, sewage collection disposal system, stormwater drainage system is provided, constructed, and located in accordance with the standards of the bylaw. So it's really the tool that we say, okay, if there's going to be a road that runs through it, and we've decided that this is an accepted place for a road, and it's going to be a municipal road, the subdivision servicing bylaw then says, okay, the road is going to be this wide, it's going to have a roadside trail, or if you're in an urban place, it has sidewalks on both sides or sidewalks on one side. It has the wiring is above ground or it's underground. So that's what it does. It sort of lays out, and then it lays out ways in which you can do it. So in a subdivision, you can do it. Some developers, you can do it so you do it all up front, and then you get your subdivision approved. Or you can do what's called a works and servicing agreement, and that's an agreement you lay out with the municipality and the developer, and you take a deposit for it, and you say, okay, we'll approve your subdivision, but you have to do the works, and if you don't do it, we'll use your money and we'll finish it for you. So the subdivision servicing bylaw lays out what a works and service agreement is as well. So what specifically, we sort of brainstorming thinking, okay, what's most relevant for the Parks and Trails and Greenways committee? So one of the things that I'd flag is Schedule C4 of the bylaw. It talks about storm drainage. So the schedule, I'm trying to find the page.
68 of 139, page 42.
So that's something that we haven't had. We've had sort of guidelines for storm drainage before. And so this is, you know, they're newer standards than we've had in the past, and they're trying to outline standards to mitigate hazards and damage to adjoining properties.
Yeah, so at the bottom of page 42, you'll see parks and open spaces, right? Which is also page 68 of 139, depending on which way you're looking at it. And so, what it says, if I'm reading this rightly, Daniel, is that same as those under residential multifamily, so in parks and around any park buildings or parking lots or areas where you would need storm drainage, for example, Quarry Park, but I'll get into that in a minute. Exceptional best management practices is what a BMP is that right? To achieve performance targets would be these disconnected, I don't know what it is, what is a disconnected roof downspout? Well, I guess we'd have to look that up. Anybody know?
Yeah, it's just where they have the downspout, and then then I think the intent is then the water disperses on site
And so
rather than.
It's not connected to a storm sewer.
Right.
Yeah.
A storm
Gotcha.
sewer.
Not go to.
Gotcha. And then rain gardens and bioswales, again, places where the water can soak into the ground, right? Recharge areas.
Yeah.
Some of these were things that what was it you were talking about last time, Mark?
Soil cells.
Soil cells, we might want to add that. Porous parking surfaces, right? Sand filters, filter strips, stormwater treatment, wet ponds. I don't know what the difference is between those two. Stormwater, does anybody know? Wetlands and wet ponds?
I think the wet ponds are more
They wouldn't
flashy,
have
right?
emergent
Yeah.
plants, I think.
Yeah, they just sort of take the overflow
Right,
and then,
Probably, yeah.
and then it evaporates or
Yeah.
whatever.
Water retention.
whereas,
It doesn't
yeah,
stay as
whereas
a
a wetland is obviously more of a
permanent wet.
And it could be a
permanent
depth,
wet.
a depth
Vegetated.
definition too, like
Right.
wetlands are only 4 meters really, because that's where the light penetrates to, and
Okay.
deeper water.
So I have a question just on basic and oil. So where is basic defined?
So basic is the previous page,
Huh, okay.
4.1. So 0.1 talks about what basic control is and oil control is versus enhanced control.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
I think I'm missing what is TSS. I forgot.
Total suspended solids.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Good. With this,
I think that needs to be spelled out.
I know. Hey, join the emergency committee. You should see
Oh
that.
my
Yeah. Anyway, or as I call them, TLAs, 3-letter acronyms. Anyway, I was wondering about this one. Regarding parks, we have had a park that was a reclamation project, and that's Quarry Park, which was basically a quarry, soil quarry site. It was just mud. And so with that one of the things that we installed to handle the stormwater, because we were afraid of erosion actually taking down the slopes and washing away the trails and everything, was a sediment pond, which I saw somewhere else, I think later in the document, but we do have one there down below the little waterfall in Quarry Park, and I thought we might want to add that to this list, especially if we do any more kind of reclamation or restoration projects. And I think we also had one in Singing Woods. Wasn't there one? There used to be what we called a silt pond in Singing Woods Nature Reserve, not a municipal property, but still. It was down at the bottom of that steep logging road that came down. That's the trail they're decommissioning now. And I think both of them, I mean, both Singing Woods and Quarry Park, I think have been dug out at least once, like the silt has been removed.
Yeah, I know where that is, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a big berm.
yeah.
Right.
So I would add somewhere else in the document, it's called a sediment pond, I think beside roads or something.
Yeah.
And seeing as how we've used them already. And also at Quarry Park, I don't know what the technical term would be for this, but in terms of managing stormwater, we've used straw bales in the new ditches and drainage areas to slow down the water and to soak up some of the water, but mostly to slow it down so it didn't erode gullies. And I don't know what that would be called. And we also used plantings. You know, we planted vegetation. And we used whatever that matting is called. It's sort of a straw layer, and you roll it out in a plastic netting. So it's like 2 layers of plastic netting with the
Yeah.
biomass.
Coconut fiber, I think.
Yeah, it wasn't coconut, it was straw, but same principle. Some kind, I don't know what the technical term is for that kind of slope retention temporary mat, something like that. And then we sprinkled seed over it and it worked beautifully, you know. But anyway, these are things we used in restoration projects. Sometimes parks are kind of reclaiming bits after, maybe Quarry Park was a one-off, but I would think that there are other parks that have had a lot of impact, Seymour Bay maybe being one, and where we might want to use some of these terms, so. You got them?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anybody else got anything else?
So, I see Parks and Open Spaces includes parking lots, so I'm just wondering why the oil control is not included if parking lots are
Yeah.
included in this.
I think it's because it's they're usually like the festival field or like. the-
Well, but it says parking lots.
Yeah.
That's the
In-
same too, DG, on commercial employee daily parking. They just have basic, and suspended salt.
While you guys are looking at that, Daniel, can I draw your attention to the word railroads in industrial on page 68 of 139? The word railroad is used twice.
Railroad yard.
And railroad yards and at the top, railroad equipment. And I thought if you took it out, people might take the whole thing more seriously as a
You
goal.
don't expect us to have rail?
Yeah,
roads?
never know.
Not even in a